Live to see it, friends, and welcome to the World Transformed. This program is your guide to an astounding future that lies ahead, one that will be here sooner than you think, and one that you have an important role to play in bringing about. At the World Transformed, we want to introduce you to what may be the biggest transformation of them all, the one that begins with considering and acting on the almost limitless possibilities that lie before us, and that ends somewhere beyond the reach of the human imagination. So, when does this amazing future begin? Well, today is the day. My name is Phil Bowermaster, and with me in the virtual studio is my co-blogger, co-futurist, and co-host, Stephen Gordon. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, Phil. You doing all right?
I'm super fantastic. How are you, my friend?
Oh, man, doing great.
All right. Well, we got a fun show lined up for tonight, Stephen. This is your fave. We're doing a grab bag. So just for you, happy Friday to you, my friend.
Basically put it this way: if you don't like what we're talking about, give us a few seconds. We'll be on to the next thing. And,
we basically have three topics plus other geek, but they have no discernible theme. And when I say no discernible theme, I mean there is no theme whatsoever holding these topics together. They're just
we've been doing this a while. We're going to find a way to segue these. I promise you. It will come. It'll fall into place. It always does.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. I like your optimism on that, and I at the same time accept the challenge to making that happen. But our first story. This is two related stories. This is really cool if it happened. Right. Kind of one of those. File it under cold fusion, I guess. But the initial story that had me very excited late last week. Hydrogen turned into metal in stunning act of alchemy that could revolutionize technology in spaceflight. So,
wow.
Here's the thing, okay? In a lab, scientists were using these very tiny, they're calling them anvils. I think of them more as vices, right? But they're compressing hydrogen, compressing hydrogen, and have managed, basically at room temperature to create hydrogen metal. Now, we know metallic hydrogen exists. It's out there in the universe. We don't have it on Earth. It's not a thing that, the prevailing conditions on Earth have made possible for it to be produced. So it's something that we've been hoping, using exotic conditions in a lab, at some point we might be able to reproduce and take those conditions, make them less exotic, and at some point actually produce hydrogen metal. Hydrogen metal would be one of the most useful things that you can imagine. It would be a superconductor. They talk about applications for this.
Room temperature superconductor, right?
Room temperature superconductor. Imagine a power grid where you could send power across the U.S. and have no loss of power. Right. That's the level of superconductive capability that you would have with hydrogen metal. They talk about being able to do an MRI scan without having to have the magnets super cooled. So that big complicated MRI machine that you see would become this much simpler, much easier to deal with machine. Spacecraft would be completely different. Rockets would be completely different. A lot of the things that we currently do with metal that are hard to do because metal is heavy, even something like aluminum, this would be lighter, this would be stronger, it's more durable. It's like magic sci-fi space metal. I mean, it's hard to even describe how awesome metallic hydrogen would be if we could throw it into everyday use. And
let's call it unobtainium, like Avatar.
It's just about the old, unobtainium. Yeah, it doesn't make you fly, but other than that, they talk about super fast computers, high speed levitating trains, ultra efficient vehicles. It's the stuff, okay? This is Reardon metal from Atlas Shrugged, okay? It's just it's the wonder metal.
Yeah, and it's the MacGuffin in our sci-fi future, right? Well, how do we go about getting it, Phil? They're talking about using, this is a molecular diamondoid vice, basically,
right,
is how they say they did it. But there's some doubt about it, right? I mean, as to whether they actually accomplished that or if they did something else.
Yeah, that's the big problem with this story. As awesome as this story is, the big problem is other scientists have looked at the research and they've said, well, we're not sure that they've isolated metal hydrogen. The conclusion that they did make metal out of it is based on the shininess of what was compressed in the anvil. It's like, hey, that hydrogen is shining, therefore it's metal. Well, okay, that's a vast oversimplification of what the research says, but that's basically what they're saying. And other scientists are looking at it, they're going, well, those vices, they touch a lot of other things. That could just be aluminum oxide that they're seeing shining there. And some of the other critiques say that there are numerous other opportunities for false positives. And Occam's razor requires us, when we look at something like this, to say, well, extraordinary claims. Are going to require some extraordinary evidence. They've got a little bit of evidence that they've isolated metal hydrogen, and I want them to keep working on it and show us more evidence. But at this point, it seems entirely possible that they may have jumped the gun in publishing their results. Unfortunately, that's the bummer.
Well, apparently this metallic hydrogen is like one of the most abundant metals in the solar system. Is that right?
It's out there. If only. If only. Right? Yeah. In fact, one of the comments on the story talking about the fact that it's not been debunked, but it's been highly questioned. It's been highly criticized. It's maybe the most abundant metal to be found in the solar system, and that's pretty interesting when you think about, we know we've been talking about all these other metals that are out there in the asteroid belt and that sit at the core of some of these other planets, and all the metals that are on this planet. But the problem is getting to it. Jupiter and Saturn, according to this commenter, and I didn't do my research and see if they're correct, but it says that if you go a few Earth diameters down into Jupiter and Saturn, you're going to find unimaginable pressure, far higher pressure than what that diamond anvil is able to create. And those are the conditions that would create metallic hydrogen, and that's where you would find it. You would find it in the atmospheres of those planets. And even if that's not true, even if this commenter has it wrong, we definitely know that space is, out in space, when you think about neutron stars, when you think about black holes, when you think about these gas giant planets, these huge structures that create tremendous gravity and can create tremendous pressure, that is ultimately the technology, if you want to call it a technology, that is ultimately the environment that could produce something like this. So if we're not able to build a diamond anvil on Earth today that can do it, I think we have to look to the stars, right? We have to look to space to get the inspiration for the technology that ultimately will do it. And maybe we actually have to go out there and make use of that quote-unquote technology before we're ever going to realize hydrogen metal. We'll see. Again, I wish these guys all the luck in the world. I hope that they actually have done it, and that it turns out that we do find a way to produce the stuff here on Earth. But even if we don't, I guess this is kind of the silver lining to the story. Even if we never figure out a way to make it on Earth, it's out there, and all we got to do is go get it.
I suspect we will figure out ways of doing it on Earth, and if we haven't already, and it might require something exotic, like we've got a super collider that makes miniature black holes that last a microsecond, right?
Right.
What if we were able to do something with that technology to produce metallic hydrogen? Who knows? There's these miniature black holes are so small, maybe they don't have the mass to have the kind of pressure we're talking about. But hey, I'm just spitballing here.
Well, so, the thing is, there are always unanticipated problems, to any new technology that is developed, and there are also unanticipated potential applications. There's always something unexpected lying around the corner for anything that we do. There's always a surprise out there. So yeah, it's entirely possible that something we're already doing now in a completely different field could hold the key to figuring out how to make this happen if we haven't done so already. And hey, speaking of unexpected results, okay.
Challenge accepted.
I did what I could there.
Yeah.
How about this headline? For those of you who've been trying to fight inflammation, you've been saying, "Well, I'm not going to eat this X because that's an eat peanuts. It's just going to that's an inflammatory food and it's going to inflame me." And we all know the bad side to inflammation. The headline is "Every meal triggers inflammation." So,
yep.
Dang. I mean, now what, right? Here I've been worried. Well, if I eat flour, right? If I eat wheat, that's definitely inflammatory. I mean, I kind of, I got a pretty good running list of foods that I know are inflammatory for me anyway. And if you read up on this, you can see the things that are generally inflammatory for people. But this kind of really, I don't know, this sets us back to square one on the whole inflammation issue, doesn't it? Or does it?
Well,
what do you make of this?
I think there are some foods that are obviously more inflammatory than others. So your list is probably still a good list, Phil.
Yeah.
But this sort of says, hey, you know what? Every time you eat, it's going to have inflammation, and it gives a reason for that. When you eat, you're taking in, a boatload of bacteria. I mean, our environment is we don't live in clean rooms.
Right.
We don't, and so. You're taking in huge amounts of bacteria, and so your body basically is fighting off infection with every single meal you eat, because it just has to. Otherwise, you would die of some infection from any time you ate something. But so what can be done about it? Well, you could probably limit the amount of inflammation with dietary modification. There's, again, some things are going to be more inflammatory than others, but hey, this might, be a good argument for periodic fasting. Just giving your body, what if you had one day a week that you ate very little, or maybe not at all, one day a week, gives your body a little bit of a recovery, That might there might be there are people that have advocated for that for years and years, and maybe here's a good reason for it.
Well, I practice intermittent fasting periodically. I actually do that fairly regularly, and that's not a whole day, but it's usually 16, 18 hours, and I'll do it two or three times a week, and you can feel a whole just host of physiological things it does to your system. I mean, you really feel different if you do that. If you build in a break from digesting food. But yeah, I think this sort of provides a big part of the answer of why that works. And I think it really helps us to kind of clarify our thinking around inflammation. Where before, you might look at it in a very, very simplistic way and say, well, inflammation bad, therefore I won't eat inflammatory food because I don't want this response in my body. True, but more to the point, this response is always going to happen. This response is your immune system at work, and it's not a bad thing up to a point. It's something that your body has to do. But yeah, it's like you take the time off from eating, which our ancestors did, not by choice, but because it was, kind of like, well, there's no food now, so I'll eat again tomorrow. You take the time off from eating, and that gives your immune system the chance to get the upper hand in the situation. It's like, well, we've dealt with that bacteria, now we're just going to chill out for a while, right? And rather than, here, let me, flame on again. Well, here, let me flame on again, right? It's like you kind of stay in this constant state of inflammation, or this constant state of having to re-trigger the response, and it's like.
You get far enough down that road, you end up with gut leakage and all kinds of problems, and perhaps periodic fasting could be one way of dealing, heading that off, perhaps.
Yeah.
So.
Well, my weird analogy for this, I don't know, did you see the NFC championship game last week? Atlanta against Green Bay?
Did not.
the thing they talked about was, the Falcons had the Green Bay defense on the field for so long they couldn't deal anymore, right? I mean, it's like the defense was exhausted, and that's kind of what we do to our bodies, right? I mean, it's like we just, it's the offense needed to make something happen just so the defense could sit and rest for a while, right? And kind of
and recover,
and recover. If you take some time off. You make that happen. Your body goes into defensive mode after you eat, but it wasn't meant to always be in defensive mode. Maybe you want to go on offense once in a while and do other things.
I just know that on those times that I do fast, when you sit down to break that fast, right? I mean, when you and you have your meal following that period of time, it's like a molecular dance. I mean, it's like your whole body is just, the pleasure of that meal is intense. I mean, because, it's your body saying, okay, yeah, I can enjoy this meal. I'm fully ready for it. And I think there's something to that. We don't often talk, about dietary practices, but I think there's something to that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. I think that in the long run, we can learn a lot about how our bodies work at a very micro level through some big macro practices. And I mean, we haven't learned the specifics. People were doing intermittent fasting. I mean, people have been fasting for thousands of years, right?
Right.
But before there was any viable theories of nutrition or any of that kind of stuff. People have been fasting, and they've been understanding the impact that it has on our bodies. But it's interesting when we look at these very refined biochemical processes that we're understanding to greater and greater detail. That the triggers for those can be these very large macro processes. Eating, not eating. The binary decisions that ultimately reflect all the way down into the into the most intricate details of what's happening in our bodies. It's really quite interesting, and I think we'll see lots more of examples of this as we understand this better. We're as with so many other things, we're only kind of at the very beginning of understanding how this all really works.
This next one's like a complete surprise to me, Phil, this next story. Scientists find evidence of mathematical structures in classic books. Now, we talk about, sometimes the technology shows up before we figure out the application. Who would have suspected this as an application for, data mining, right? I mean, but here, the academics, they put more than 100 works of world literature from people like Dickens, Shakespeare, Alexander Dumas, and Thomas Mann, et cetera, Samuel Beckett. And they've put it through statistical analysis and looking at sentence lengths and how they varied. They found that an overwhelming majority of the studied texts, the correlations and variations of sentence length, were governed by the dynamics of a cascade. Perhaps what
does that mean, Stephen? Yeah. The bottom line is these novels are fractals, and the what's the term they use? They're self-similar. Okay, so in fact, the way the sentences are structured, if you follow the pattern by sentence length, are reflective of the book itself overall. Right? In the same way that
you could take a paragraph of, Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, perhaps, and the flow and structure of that paragraph, it would be similar to the flow and structure of the entire novel.
The book overall. That's right. Yeah.
Amazing.
It's like wow. And what's really interesting is the one that demonstrates the model best is James Joyce Finnegan's Wake, which is this, as far as I'm concerned, incomprehensible, inscrutable novel. And you would think that there is no structure to that whatsoever if you've ever read it. And instead, it turns out it's almost a perfect fractal. To me, this says something really interesting about the whole creative process. It says something very interesting about how our brains work, and what it is
I guarantee you these guys, when they sat down to write, weren't thinking about how do I make the most beautiful fractal.
Right.
But there is a point in the story when you're in our something, when there just comes a point it's time to finish it. Okay, there's a beginning, middle, and an end. And have you ever read a novel where you realized that the novel should have ended like 4 chapters ago?
Right.
And they should have, and this thing has gone on way too long, and I've got about a 3-chapter epilogue that doesn't really relate to the story as a whole. Maybe it's our brains, just sort of saying this, the fractal is lost. We've the pattern that's been set in the throughout the novel has been broken by more that should have been more than what should have been here. Has been added to the novel at the end. But it's I think that's fascinating. I wonder,
I think it might be, that could be. We think there's all this stylistic stuff, but it could be why we recognize when a book has been written by a collaborator, or when they're switching back and forth between 2 different authors, because it might be hard for 2 people to get into that groove, right, and to produce something that has that structure. Because I can't help but picture this as kind of the product of a single brain, right? That you let one brain write, and it's going to ultimately reflect that.
It might be a marker of what we consider great literature too. I mean, it might very well be that Charles Dickens exhibits this, and a Harlequin romance doesn't. I would like to see I'd like to see the same analysis for what we would consider junk literature, right? Or and see if something that comes out will be different.
Man, why you gotta go trash talking about the Harlequin romances, huh? What have they ever done to
Phil,
you?
I keep after you to up your game reading wise.
You are such an elitist. I can't believe it. It's just it's killing me here. No, I think that would be interesting, because they did look at great literature, and it would be interesting if they would look at not great literature, right? Throw in some. Throwing some old pulp novels, throwing some Harlequin romances, and pot boilers, and it'd be interesting to see if those are good fractals too. They might be, because they tend to follow a formula, right? We know that at a macro level they follow a formula. It'd be interesting to see if the writing, if the structure, kind of the mathematical structure also follows that formula. That's hey. If the people who did this research are listening, here's some follow-up research for you. Stephen and I would be
throw in the junk and see how that comes out.
See what that shows. But I think ultimately it says something really interesting about how our brains work, and it just goes to show you that one of the reasons that things like fractals appeal to us so much is because they show us something that intuitively, structurally, we recognize about ourselves, and it just shows that we're part of this whole mathematical universe that we live in, that we really are denizens of that world. And on that note of being denizens of a mathematical universe, I think it's time to geek out a little bit even further. So Stephen, hey, let's do another Timothy update. You gave us a great update on what's going on with him with the ballooning and so forth last week. I think there have been developments. What's going on?
There have been. Well, let me first brag on him by saying that he was involved in a group project that he carried the heavy load on, and basically what they were trying to do was they were building a robot to monitor and in real time deal with the salinity of a saltwater fish tank. Okay. And so that if something got too salty, it would deal with it, or if it wasn't salty enough, it would deal with it, so as to keep a nice ocean-like environment for saltwater fish in a tank. And he wrote the code. He built the robot, and he got an A. So I wanted to first brag on, as a dad, I want to brag on him before I talk about this next story.
Good work, Timothy. We're proud of you.
Good work, Timothy.
Okay.
Awesome. And he's we got him at the right school. Let's put it that way. He got a good match. He's a STEM guy at a STEM school. So, anyway,
perfect.
Yeah. on Saturday late last week on Saturday, he and a group attempted to launch a high altitude balloon, a weather balloon, and unfortunately, and they're not quite sure how it happened. Either the electronics package was failed to be attached properly to the radio, or it was not transmitting properly before they launched. But I mean, literally, the balloon's still in sight going up, and they realize they had a problem. They're not getting telemetry back, and there goes their electronics package, and bye-bye.
Oh no.
And so they're going back to the drawing board, saying, okay, my thought and when I was visiting with Timothy about it, I said, well, make sure you got good telemetry on the ground.
Right.
Is your machine talking to your computer right there on the ground? Well, yeah, okay, let's launch. But you don't wait until you're already launched to find out if you're talking with it. At any rate, that's just
a little armchair quarterbacking there, huh, Dad?
Yeah, a little Monday morning quarterbacking. But I think there may be something to my
yeah, I think you could be onto something there.
Yeah, I might be. But I wish them well. They're going to try again this coming Saturday. And of course, here's what they're attempting to do. Timothy and one other guy at the school went and got their ham radio license. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the point of which is to be able to communicate with first these high altitude balloons, and to be able to monitor them and monitor them in flight and get back telemetry from them over the ham radio network, right? I mean,
right.
ham radio frequencies, and then to be able to recover it at where it comes down. But the ultimate goal is to be communicating the same way with CubeSats. And Tech is going to be putting up a CubeSat, within a year or two, and they need people on flight and being able to monitor it as it passes over. And Timothy will be a big part of that. He is one of two that has the requisite licensing to do it. So I'm excited for him. He's
mission control. That is super exciting.
Yeah.
Well, keep us posted on the hopefully they get the balloon going successfully next time, and Timothy's long journey here towards becoming the mission control guy. Can't wait to hear more about that. That's exciting.
Timothy was going, oh, the helium. Oh, I can't believe we lost that much.
Pricey helium, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The helium alone makes it. That's probably the most expensive component of the whole thing, actually.
Yeah, more so than the electronics, amazingly. So, yeah, it's. I wish them well, and hope they have better success. In the coming week or two.
All right, well, keep us posted on that. Our final other geek, NASA's new astronaut suits are straight out of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Hey, follow the link, folks, and you will see that we're not kidding. These look a lot like the 2001: A Space Odyssey spacesuits, and it's just, it's just good when life imitates favorite science fiction movies. It's cool when they build a space shuttle and call it the Challenger, and it's cool when we see spacesuits that look like the ones that we saw when we were kids in the movies. I don't know, something very comforting about that, and it's the thing that makes me know that eventually I'll have the flying car and the Mr. Fusion from Back to the Future, right? Because it takes a while, but ultimately we get it.
The first spacesuits, you have to have pressure. Our bodies, are pressing outward 14.7 pounds per square inch, because that's, at sea level, that's we get 14.7 pounds of pressure pushing in on us. So
right.
Our bodies are made to push out 14.7 pounds of pressure. And so, unfortunately, that's, in space, there is no pressure on you. So the early spacesuits would accomplish this by basically being a balloon,
right,
pressing in with the amount of pressure you need. But, astronauts would talk about how exhausting it was to move in that thing, because every movement you were basically having to bend that balloon, right?
Right.
You were fighting against the balloon with every movement you make. These new suits apparently provide the pressure you need, but are built much more compact and I would imagine you don't have to fight it quite so much. Be able to move in space, and so
probably they looked that way in the movie because it just, from some costume designers, it looked better for them to be more streamlined and not so bulky and not to look like the spacesuits of the day. But function has followed form in this case, and we've actually caught up to spacesuits that look cooler because, as you point out, they're a little bit better engineered. They're able to solve certain problems, and it is better to walk around in something that's more like clothes than walking around in a balloon. Yeah. But net result, it looks more like the movies, and I think that's what makes me very happy about this story.
Well, this has been fun this week, Phil. We've had a great one.
Well, we've had a great week. It's been great talking with you. We're going to be back on Monday with 3 brand new shows. We look forward to talking with you then, and until next time, live to see it.